What's going on, friends? Welcome back to Roleplaying Unlimited Out of Character. How we doing tonight?
Outstanding. Had a great game yesterday. Got a nap today. Ready to talk about some gaming.
Oh yeah.
Yep, likewise. Had a good game last night. Had an okay day at work, and now we're here to have a good discussion about all our favorite hobby.
How about you, Cheddar? How's your day?
That was pretty much right on schedule to turn and look as you said that.
Well, we're glad that you're all here hanging out with us for another Out of Character here. As the guy said, we are talking about gaming tonight. General discussion. Our first focus is on our first time role-playing experiences, be it video game, be it tabletop role-playing game. Pretty much anything. That is a very large spectrum that you can easily fill a lot of conversation with, so I would like to hear from both of you. I know Jason posted a few things in our chat, so why don't you go ahead and elaborate on that?
So, my younger days, the video games kind of aren't there like they are in today's spectrum. I think our earliest things were Atari 400 and with adventure and stuff like that, so it wasn't really an RPG per se. But my first experiences with RPGs were roughly 84-ish, and a friend of mine that I was sitting next to in class was working on a character sheet, just a homemade on a notebook paper sheet. And I was like, oh, I'm so interested. I want to play. I've always wanted to play, you know? So he made me a character, and we kind of talked about it for a couple of weeks. And then we started playing at after school in the park while we waited for our rides. And
Cool.
It was pretty much your generic human fighter. I fought lots of lizard men, orcs, goblins. There wasn't really a whole lot of plot that I remember, but if I was to equate it to something, it would be akin to Goblin Slayer in today's terms.
Okay.
And that was pretty much my very first experience with a tabletop RPG. Didn't have my own dice, didn't have books, just kind of winged it. And I was learning the numbers and the dice and everything, and that was back in the days of THAC0.
Good old two-hit armor class 0. The astounding algebra that was required to figure that kind of stuff out for a lot of players. That was what turned a lot of people off from the game back in those days.
Oh yeah, one of the the satanic panic back in those days was a big deal. And one of my friends, his name was Brian Tolley. I went to high school with him, and he had this saying that if you can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, you shouldn't be playing games like that anyways.
Yeah.
But it was always more math than dragons. And, and that was back in first edition. I remember when second edition came out, and it really wasn't that much different. It was just kind of a rewrite and streamline.
Yeah.
But I just, from there, another friend of mine in junior high gave me my first book. It was a first printing monster manual that I still have.
Nice.
And it was just, didn't have my own dice or anything. And it was a great experience. And it built, onto itself a little by little. And here I am, 40 years later, 35 years later.
How old were you when you first started playing?
I had to have been about 12 or 13.
Seems about the standard age that most people get into it, I think.
Yeah, it was 84-ish, so 83, 84 school year, I think was that time. So I was probably 13.
I was 5. How about you, J-Man?
My very first RPG experience, well, tabletop, it was the old Red Box. Basic D&D. where it has the little adventure inside where you go around playing by yourself as a human fighter. You meet a cleric and you fight a mad wizard. A whole little adventure. Most
Right.
people who at that time also all played that. And that was my very first experience with it. That was basic Dungeons and Dragons, where elves were basically fighter mages, dwarves were just fighters, halflings
Right.
were rogues. But again, that was just by myself. I had that little kit and I played with it. I don't even remember where I got it. It was like a hand-me-down or something.
Right.
I got it from somebody, so it wasn't in the best shape. Didn't have all the dice. I had to go get some more dice. And it wasn't until later that I found some other people to play it with me. And then they wanted to play, AD&D, regular second edition. And I was like, oh, I'll just play an elf. And they're like, well, an elf what? And I'm like, an elf? An elf what? Like, I don't understand. It's the elf, with the magic and the fighting. Oh, it's like a fighter mage. I'm like, what? So I hadn't looked at any of the second edition AD&D stuff yet. I just knew the basic stuff, so I was like really confused at that point. But yeah, so I used to play in high school. I found a group that was playing during lunch, and I would just watch them for a while. And eventually, they were like, "Dude, you want to get involved in this?" And I was like, "Oh yes." And I still know a couple of those guys from high school, so it's been a good thing to get some good friends from. As far as just RPGs, though, my first experience was in Nintendo games, Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior. So I had those before I had D&D.
Was the wizard in the red box that everybody talks about, was that Zanzertem?
I can't quite remember his name. The name that comes to mind is Gargamel, and I know that's wrong because that's the Smurfs. But it was something like that. It was some weird, crazy name like that. And then the cleric girl, she gets killed by him. He magic missiles her, and she dies. And you chase him off. You can kill him. You just kind of chase him off and carry her body out. That was how that adventure kind of ends.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know that I ever played the red box original, but I know that I did start with traditional Dungeons and Dragons, where there were only the 3 alignments and there were no classes, there were only races. Very simplistic system. And I think for myself, what the appeal was over AD&D at the time was that I had a brand new copy of this remastered D&D book, whereas the only AD&D material I had was all hand-me-downs, and the bindings were all cracked and torn. I'm like, yeah, I want to play the new system, not realizing that this is just a reprint of the original. Because my experience would be similar to both of yours, of course, playing video games before getting into the tabletop realm. Legend of Zelda, I think, would have been the very first RPG that I ever played, 84, 85. And then, of course, Dragon Warrior, Final Fantasy, of which that's my favorite series of all time for RPG video games. And I want to say it was my sister's first husband who saw me playing these types of games, and he just asked, "Do you ever play D&D?" And I didn't know what he was talking about. I was like, where's that cartridge? Let me play that on my Nintendo. He's like, no, that's not how it is. And then he just shows up one day with these books and these funny shaped dice and starts trying to teach me how to play the system. I think I spent probably the first 3 years, as many children did, not really knowing how to play the system, just rolling dice and making believe, and maybe a somewhat more structured version of make-believe than most children play.
Oh yeah, I mean it's pretty much gives us a rule set to play make-believe, and I think you nailed it on that. And I guess looking back historically, the oldest versions of the games would go back to reenacting the Napoleonic Wars and other wars with the little lead miniatures, back in the 50s, and maybe even further back than that. I'm sure they go farther back, but and Gygax came along and they did the chainmail rules, which kind of took those playtime activities and gave them rules and then they took it one step further and added the fantasy flair to it. Now that would be some books I would love to get a hold of, those 3 Stapleback books of back in the day, but not only are they hard to find in original prints, but I mean, even a reprint, from the 90s is hard to get a hold of.
And costly, no doubt, I'm sure.
Yeah, and the cost is just going up, even on the reprints. Back in the 90s, when second edition was really doing the push on all their players options stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of the pre 3.0.
2.5 as I call it.
Yeah, I guess looking back retrospectively, it looks like that. I have a lot of those books, by the way.
Yeah, those were good additions for sure.
Oh, yeah. And they just expanded on what you already have. It didn't get rid of it. And they did a reprint of those original Stapleback books, the very first edition of Dungeons & Dragons.
Now, Evil Dawn contributed in our Discord chat here with the following. His first role-playing experience was in the 80s. He was 10 or so. He got the D&D box set. I guess we're talking the red box that we frequently refer to. His younger brother and him played the beginning adventure as a solo character, and they fought over the rules instantly, and his grandfather took the game away for the rest of the day. Thus started the path towards the gamer I am today. That rings true with the gamer that he is today as well, because there are frequently occasional rules disputes there involving Mr. Evil Dawn.
I'm just as guilty as anybody else of rules lawyering. I think what I've evolved to is offering my advice, and this is what I would do as a DM, especially when it's put forth in a question. What would you? It's like last night, we didn't know how to do the axe damage, and we just ad hoc'd it and just went with it. And I said, "This is what I would do," and you did what you wanted to do, and and whether they coalesce or not, we didn't argue about it. We just Charlie Miked and went through and continued the game. And even when the bat broke later, I was like, all right, how do you want to do that? I was going to get rid of the bat, and you're like, just leave it. I'm like, all right, we'll go fast and loose.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It was the story.
That is one thing I like about the Unisystem rules that we use for All Flesh Must Be Eaten is it is very much a diceless gameplay. A lot of times, and peek behind the fourth wall there, a lot of times when I'm asking you guys to roll dice, that's kind of a stall tactic for me. When you guys are asking, what's in response to this question that I have to ask, and that can fill any number of possible topics. But the way for me to start thinking of an answer rather than just instantly pause the game is, okay, let's get some rolls here, and I can kind of base some answers off of those rolls, while at the same time starting to create the answers to your questions.
Yeah, I get that. Sometimes you're just kind of like, well, let's see how well you can answer this question for yourself.
Right, exactly. But for the most part, it is intended to be a diceless game. We do roll a lot more dice, I think, than the system intends, but that's, I think, harkens back to many of our origins in dice-heavy gameplay like Dungeons & Dragons.
Now, I mean, we're talking about our very first experiences. How do you think your experiences have evolved over time? Like, are they the same now as you play as to the beginning? Because I know my perspective, my attitude, and the way I play is very much different than when I first started.
Definitely. My style is still very story focused. I want to create a first, second, third act, and possibly even beyond in a continuing series maybe. That part of me has always been the case from day one when I was 10 years old and first started playing the system. But I've become a lot more of a collaborative GM, I think, in that it's not necessarily the battle of wits between GM and character. It's not a battle of, well, if these dice aren't in your favor, then you're going to be rolling up a new character every 3 sessions, because that doesn't lend itself to good, cohesive storytelling, I find. And that's the way I was brought up. My sister's first husband, who ran me through my very first D&D adventure, I played a dwarf fighter. And I've told the story several times, but this guy created a master illusion dungeon for me to go explore. It took me forever just to figure out how to get inside the place. And as soon as I did, 15 feet down the first hallway, I step on an illusionary floor, and now I'm submerged in 30 feet deep water. And I'm wearing full plate armor, and I've got a battle axe, so he's like, you got to get rid of your armor if you want to swim out. Okay, I get rid of the armor. You're still too heavy, you probably got to drop the axe too. By the time I get out of this thing, I have no equipment. But I'm at least on the other side of the pool, and in the very next room, I face one of those shrieker mushrooms, which alerts the next room's occupants to my presence, and then my character is dead. So that was my very first foray into D&D, was, okay, I create this character, I'm in the city, I get the mission, they tell me which way to go, I spend probably an hour just figuring out how to get into the place, and then as soon as I do, alright, here we go, oh, I'm dead. And it's fun in its own way, because it's a lot of back and forth, and you don't know what's going to happen, but it can be very anticlimactic if that's always what you're experiencing from your GM. So in that respect, I've become a lot less reliant on the random chance of the dice and more on the spirit of the collaborative story.
How about you, Justin? Has your gaming evolved over time like that too?
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say it has. I'm a lot more, kind of like Dan said, I'm a lot more receptive to everybody else. Like if I'm DMing the players, if I'm playing with the other players and the DM are doing, and what kind of game they're expecting to play. When I'm DMing, I'll ask people, I'm like, hey, is this the kind of gameplay you want? Or is this the kind of gameplay you want? Or let me know what kind of session you want to have so I can tailor my storytelling to those needs. Because we're all here just to have fun, and if one guy is doing stuff that other people aren't doing, it makes it less fun. So we all have to kind of be on the same page, I think.
Please finish.
Whereas, when I was younger, I still do fall back on this sometimes. I got very engaged in the mechanics and learning the mechanics and knowing the mechanics and being able to game the mechanics because I wanted to feel powerful. I was like, oh, okay, if I do this, 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 and this, I'll be very powerful with this ability.
Right.
It'll be very hard to stop. I'll be killing everything. So that was how I was when I was younger, and it still kind of carries over into some of the stuff I do. I do it now because I want to know how people are going to use it against me if I'm DMing. And I also want to know, okay, if I wanted to have some really cool powers as a player, what do I need to do? And I might do that and not really game it, just have it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an evolution, like I said.
I just wanted to interject to one of the points you made midway through all of that about if one player is doing something that the rest of the players aren't, it can kind of derail the experience. And that is exactly what used to happen in the very first, well, not the very first, but I want to say, I guess my first adult iteration of Role Playing Unlimited, like the first 4 people that I was gaming with back in the day, and Evil Dawn was one of them. And he would remember this vividly in that, okay, we're starting in the tavern, our party meets each other, we're given the mission, and every step along the way, there's that one guy in the group who's just, well, let's not go to the castle to talk to the king, let's go to the bar and get drunk. No, we're not doing that. We're going to talk to the king and we're going to get the mission. And there's just that one player that's fighting every step of the way. It's like, here's the train, here's the rail, and he wants to derail the entire story to the point where his character was just consistently drunk in every scene. And Don's character finally said, I don't even think it was Don's character. I think it was Richard in the group who took this character's wineskin from him and hit it with the rest of the luggage on the pack mule, just thinking, well, at least we'll be able to make the over-country travel a little bit quicker, rather than him every few minutes just saying, like, well, my character's drunk, so he's going to get off his horse and go pee over here or go raid this farmhouse, or any number of nonsense that prevents us from playing the story. And sure enough, right when we get on the road, the player's like, okay, my character starts getting drunk, and Richard's like, nope, no he doesn't, because your wineskin is not on your person. What do you mean it's not on my person? Well, he figures it out, it's got to be on the pack mule. So he goes and cuts the strap, and all of a sudden the group's luggage is all over the frickin' causeway, and he's just digging through it. Oh, found my wineskin. Chug, 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 chug. We've played for 2.5 hours. The only thing we've accomplished is that one guy likes to get drunk, the rest of the party doesn't want him to be drunk. That's all we've established. Story? What story?
You know, over the years they've had all kind of cliches. You know, what's the famous one? Can I have a Mountain Dew? I cast magic missile at the darkness. Woo! And blah, blah. You know, but there's a reason why they're cliches, because we all like to be social when we gather.
Right.
And we go through, I think, all these age... that's not the right word. We go through different stages of gaming. It's like in the beginning we have the hack and slash. Oh, gotta follow all the numbers. Gotta kill everything, hack everything. I don't want to talk. Let's just roll dice and kill stuff. And then you get to the oh, wait a minute. I want to solve the puzzles, or I want to achieve the goals. And I became a goal-oriented player for a lot of years. And now I think I'm pretty much story. I really like the story.
For sure. I think that's definitely where it's at, creating that collaborative story that people will continue to talk about for years to come. And whether that's a story-driven game or a character-driven game that creates the story itself, either are valid options, or even a hybrid of both. I know that some of our most memorable Enemir campaigns are highly story-driven, but your characters still had a great deal of input in those as well. Similarly, the character-driven Forgotten Realms campaign that we played all those years ago is still very much in the forefront of our collective memories when it comes to epic storytelling.
Oh, sure.
Most.
Oh, yeah. And like you said, it's got to be collaborative. Otherwise, the PCs just feel like they're sitting there watching a movie. Otherwise,
Right.
like a cutscene in a video game. Yeah, that's fine, but I want to play.
Exactly.
See, and I've kind of gotten... I haven't watched a lot of it, but the classic Critical Role, they taught me something that was a little bit different, and I kind of enjoyed it, and I've tried to adapt to it and pull it into my own play. I try to watch the stories of the other PCs and not just through the eyes of my PC. Like you said, Justin, a lot of times you wait and it's like watching a movie, and I've kind of gotten to where I enjoyed that. I like watching the stories of the other PCs just as much as I enjoy being part of my own story, and overall, all of us is the story.
Oh yeah, those are my favorite moments as a GM, and I say it time and again, is when it gets to that point where I'm not even playing anymore, I'm just watching what you guys are doing, and it may only last 2 or 3 minutes, because the whole point of what you guys are doing without me is to set up that next point to where somebody then looks over and says, okay, well, GM, what happens if we do this? And now I'm back in the conversation. But even those few moments here or there that can sometimes stretch into 20, 30 minutes, depending on how in character and in depth the players want to go. I've seen those before. And that's one of the brilliant parts that I like about digital play versus in-person play. There's something about in-person that just can't ever be matched. But one part of in-person play that I always missed out on was we tend to run with pretty large parties. And invariably there would be 2 people over here in this room, 3 people over here doing this, 2 people doing this. And I'm out in the backyard watching this role play going on, and then I go back in the house and I'm watching this role play going on. I'm missing bits and pieces of all of it. Whereas when we're playing collectively on the same server, especially for all those years when we were doing all text play, I wasn't missing anything. I might miss something in the moment, but I had that record intact to where I could go back the day after the session and be like, oh, okay, here's what happened. Here's what happened. Literally nothing is missed.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I mean, if money was no object, I would love to have a in-person setup similar to any of the other, filmed games, and just have a production crew that films everything while we play, and had to have a record of it.
Oh yeah.
But the in-person, there's a little bit lost on camera. It's better than text, but it's like you say, you have the record of it. But I really miss that in-person play, and that's what I want the most.
Yeah, it's been 6 years since I've done an in-person play game, and there's a lot of aspects of that I do miss. I think Big Daddy Pancake, he had a pretty cool setup there for a while when he was doing his streamed games, because he actually went and got those Dwarven Forge 3D mini terrain sets, which we played with in Role Playing Unlimited for a few years there as well. But he then had the in-person / digital hybrid where he had the camera kind of bird's eye over the map, and he was the only person on camera and on voice. Or the other players might have been on voice, so you could hear them talking, but then he would physically manipulate the map and control the combat in that way.
Yeah, I mean, over the years, you watched how everything's evolved, not just us as players, but the games themselves, And I remember the very first time I went to a LARP, I was like, this is awesome! I don't know what to do, but it's awesome!
Right? I still, J-Man was the first one of our in-person group to delve into that as well, because we had kind of heard about the LARPing experience, and Nero in particular, 2000, 2001, but he was the first one that actually went to a meet and greet and started seeing what the system was about, meeting some of the people involved in it, and then he came back to our tabletop later that night, and he's like, you guys got to check this out. And we were hooked for a good number of years after that.
So your guys' first experience with that was through us in Vegas.
Yep.
For a buffer LARP, yes, I had been doing the vampire stuff before that. In fact, as far as a nice little segue, my first horror RPG experience was with Tabletop Vampire the Masquerade, which quickly led into the vampire LARP.
Yeah, in that same context, I did do the Star Wars LARP that Cool Collectibles had put together to kind of capture some of the Episode 1 hype. And I want to say we had maybe 30 players or something at that first event out there at that ranch, and it was a blast. And that's where the majority of our Role Playing Unlimited crew was actually kind of bonded together. I had already known Don, and I knew Johansson a little bit here and there from the Cool Collectibles shop. I had run into him there, and we had hung out and talked, but we had never actually played in person together. But James, Ben, Justin, Darren, four solid people from the crew, and then later Sean, also from Star Wars role-playing live action. All 5 of them just through that one kind of collective experience, that lifelong friends.
Well, that's how I came to know you guys. I met you guys through Nero. That was where I met you guys at when we were doing our demo days.
Oh yeah, those were a blast. I had a lot of fun with Nero in 2001, 2002. That was, if there's a list of priorities in my life at that point in time, Nero was in the top 3, no doubt. Now, speaking of different evolutions of gaming as well, we talked about our personal evolution, And Justin kind of started to delve into the horror games experience, which is going to be our next primary topic, but still kind of touching on role-playing experiences and the evolution of role-playing games themselves. Which systems have you guys particularly enjoyed? Maybe not even necessarily D&D. I know, Jason, you like some Pathfinder. I know Justin has the world's premier Palladium collection. So what other systems have kind of struck your interest from time to time?
Well, for me, like you said, my favorite right now is Pathfinder 1E. I haven't delved into any of the new stuff, and that's more or less a financial decision rather than a preference decision over this system's better, that system's better. I just, after rebuilding a couple of libraries over the years, it's not worth it monetarily to me to have to rebuild, relearn, and rebuy everything all over again. So yeah, Pathfinder's my favorite over the years.
I'm finally getting to a similar point. I think largely from the learning perspective, just that my brain is like at occupancy and I don't want to lose the things that I have to make room for learning a new system. But I'm still very much a sucker for, ooh, new, gotta have it.
I get that. As far as Palladium, I'm not a huge fan of the system, of the mechanics. I'm a huge fan of their world building and their back stories and the stuff the stories they tell with it. But the mechanics of it, it can be pretty bad, actually. From a mechanic,
are they still on a percentile mechanic, or have they moved on from that?
For skills, yeah, it's percentile. Combat's D20 based, but yeah, skills are like percentile, and other stuff is percentile. But yeah, the mechanics of that system can be really, really well polished. Need to be polished. That's all about the world and the story, Rifts basically.
Yeah,
the story, the world of Rifts. As far as what system, like mechanics, I like the best, I keep coming back to the fact that I really like the storyteller system that White Wolf introduced with their games, their tabletop games. I think it has a lot of, it can cover a lot of things. It can help you do a lot of things well. Whereas there's a lot of systems that are like, oh, we've covered this before. How like grappling rules. And a lot of systems are just kind of lackluster. You don't, oh, I grappled them. Okay, now what can I do? Not really much. In that system, they have a whole like bunch of different martial arts moves that you can do, as you know, with rolls and like different difficulties, and it does different things. And I'm like, it's one of the more detailed hand-to-hand combat systems I've seen in a tabletop game, and so I kind of enjoyed that. And I just enjoy. It's a little more realistic as well. If you're looking for a more grittier, realistic game, combat can be quick and deadly in that system, which is the way it was designed to be.
Now, is that a newer edition, or is that from the Reinhagen days? Because if I remember the Reinhagen days, during the first editions, it was very, very simplified and streamlined, and very much relied on story rather than rules.
That's part of the reason I like it so much, is because it's like, okay, you tell me what your character is going to do, and we've got some stats here that you can roll on to help you do the thing you're describing you're doing. And it didn't have to be bogged down in mechanics. It was like, okay, you're attacking the guy, that's a dexterity plus firearms roll. And it's difficulty this because this is the type of weapon you're using, and he's going to try and dodge it. Roll against each other. You hit. Cool.
Yeah, and I like the fact that all their different systems, with minor adjustments, could all work between vampire, werewolf. They never produced it, but Ghost, which turned into Wraith. And I think there was a few others, like Hunter and something else, over through the World of Darkness in their second iterations.
That's one of the things I like most about the Fantasy Flight Star Wars system, the 5th edition Star Wars, I guess, so to speak. That we've talked about it a few times in previous OOCs and while we were playing Star Wars What If. But the narrative storytelling basis of the game combined with from my perspective, a unique dice system that allows for a greater level of collaborative storytelling. And that's a system that I will continually try to come back to, because I feel like there's something that we're missing in our group that we're going to discover throughout play in one of these campaigns, that it'll just kind of click and people are going to be like, oh, so this is what you can do with it, and it'll kind of work across the board.
Yeah, I feel like the one time we played it, we didn't really understand it very well. We were still trying to play the way we always played, so it didn't really work.
Oh yeah, and especially like you're talking about with the White Wolf system and how the combat system is very gritty and realistic, just like Alternity, one of my other favorite systems, but this Fantasy Flight Star Wars system. We learned very quickly in our Star Wars What If, when you guys encountered Dark Rey, essentially, and I thought this is going to be a great combat. The party's going against Dark Rey, and she's going to demonstrate single-handedly how a Sith Master can take out a group of characters, and it's not that type of system. It's very much intended to be, well, if you get hit once, then you better start rethinking your decisions, because 2 or 3 hits and you're probably not going to be alive anymore.
Yeah, I don't think I played that one with you guys. I think that was during my involuntary time off.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I know we returned back to Saga. Why did you choose Saga over going to that system?
We haven't, I think largely because collectively we have not been able to get on the same page of understanding the mechanics of this system well enough to play a cohesive campaign. Beyond that, there's been more than a few complaints about it, so I think kind of as a way to appease the overall collective, it's like, okay, well, we want to play Star Wars again, we want to continue the saga, or in this case, create a new saga. And the easiest way for us to do that and get the butts in the seats will be to play the system we're all familiar with.
Yeah, as far as non-traditional D20 games, my favorite has to be Champions. Because it's there's no classes. You just have points and you build what you want. There's kind of classes. They're more concepts. You know, you can build a brick, you can build a gadgeteer, you can build an energy projector, but that's about as far as it goes. It's really not a class per se.
I haven't heard of that one before.
Yeah, they've got several variations. I started with Champions 3. Essentially, it looked like Champions Cubed, and they were 3 little staple back books, about the size of the regular books. Champions 1, 2, and 3 just built on top of each other, and then now I have a hardback copy. I think it's called Champions Millennium or Champions 2000. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've played it. But the way they set it up, you could play just about anything. You could play fantasy, you could play superhero, you could play space. It didn't matter. The system was so generic that way that it really worked. And it was a lot like
nice.
All flesh must be eaten. Some of your stats and attributes are mathematically created based on other ones, but you can still increase them individually.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, GURPS is kind of the same way. A generic universal role-playing system.
Oh, okay.
I've played a few games of that, and it's a lot the same. It's designed to just be like, yeah, you can do anything with this. And GURPS even got the licensing to do, like, versions of other games in their system. They have Vampire, Werewolf, they have Traveler, they have Star Trek, they have all sorts of crap in it.
Yeah, I think the only time I ever played GURPS was they did a Star Trek variation back in, I think, the 80s or something. Early Steve Jackson stuff. A Judge Dredd variant that I played way back before there was a movie or anything like that. That was also back in the 80s in high school days for me, about 86-ish. But yeah, there was pop-up RPGs that, flash in the pan, they're here and gone, and most people don't even know they existed.
Right.
I remember that I had BattleTech for a long time, and none of my friends wanted to play it. It's like I was the only one, and I finally got rid of those books. I wish I hadn't, but
yeah, it seems like we've all kind of, through our own experiences, discovered similar styles of role-playing systems that are kind of meant to be multiversal, whether you want to play a Stone Ages thing, an Old West thing, a Far Future. For me, it was Alternity, the one that I came across in 98, which is basically... I always felt like Alternity was kind of the beta test for D&D 3.0, and they wanted to see what D&D would be like if they reversed the D20. Because the skills and the system is very similar to what 3E would eventually become, but also unique in its own way that it was a separation from AD&D 2nd edition at the time. And while Alternity does kind of have that grab all attention where, yeah, you can play something in the Old West or in the Stone Ages or in the Far Future, it's definitely a system that's been designed more with a focus on modern to futuristic ages, because if you start looking at the equipment and the skill lists from trying to play like a medieval type game in Alternity, you find that the options are extremely limited, and if you're going to play an Alternity game, why not just play, or if you're going to play a medieval game, why not just play frickin' D&D?
Yeah, and in addition to all of this, pop culture has become very ingrained in all of our gaming. And I look back on the days when I first started playing, and the pop culture thing was the Satanic Panic, or you'll go insane, or all of those really unrealistic projections of what it was. And I look back and I see what it became, and it became mainstream. And as our age group aged and we became the people that developed things, look at EverQuest and
Right.
Warcraft and Final Fantasy, and all of these things came out from those early players and their imaginations. And when they became those that ran the world, it expanded and it just grew.
Very true. I'm glad that you brought up the Satanic Panic thing again, because that's come up a few times, and those were my keywords to remember that Mr. Murtaugh has also answered our first role-playing experiences question on our Discord chat, where he says that my first tabletop gaming experience was a D&D box set that my brothers got. It wasn't the box set. I remember it had several different colored dragons on the box, came with several dungeon mats. There was a lot of fuss about Satanic Panic and people killing themselves over D&D, which even at a young age he found absurd. When his character died, he ran to the kitchen and grabbed a butter knife, pretending that he'd have to kill himself, and Mother was not amused. His brothers will still sometimes razz him about it, and they don't believe it was a joke. It was a butter knife.
I remember when I first started kind of getting into it, my mom for sure was like, "What are you doing?" Really worried about it. And the first time I ever went to a vampire LARP, she was really freaked out too. Like, "What is going on? Are you drinking blood? What is happening?"
Yeah, that's funny stuff for sure. Like, it's definitely something that I went through in my family as well. I come from a pretty strong Christian background growing up, so getting into D&D at age 10 was definitely not something that my mom wanted for me. Interestingly enough, also going back to Mr. Murtaugh, that was one of the ways that he managed to convince his parents to allow him to join Nero, because when we joined Nero, we're in our early 20s. Most of us. John is like 14, maybe at the most at this time. And the way he got his parents to agree to allow him to go to the first weekend event out in Kingman that we did was when I would drive him to the games and back and forth, I listened to like Christian music, and I have like Christian books on tape, like dramatic reenactments of Left Behind and stuff that we're listening to on the way to play Nero. So he's telling his mom, he's like, look, there's nothing satanic about it. This guy's listening to Jesus music in the car on the way up to the event. Like, everything's fine. And then she actually meets me. And I don't know that she necessarily checked, like, okay, what kind of music does he have in the car? But I think after meeting me just the one time, she was like, okay, I think this is fine. I mean...
What was his friend's name that he was gaming with, Nero? I can never remember because he's kind of not around anymore.
That was Vinny.
Yeah, those two were thick as thieves for a while.
Oh yeah, they were some cool kids that even in my early 20s I was looking at these kids. I was like, all right, yeah, they're cool. We want to be hanging out with them. There's no necessary embarrassment about like, well, these are the kids, so they got to go sit over here at the kiddie table. It was an all immersive experience. I remember I think it was one event only where we did a weekend at Sunset Park, like a back-to-back. And for one of those 2 days, like an older couple showed up, and they were fully in garb. They had their weapons on them and everything. I don't remember anything about their characters, but they were memorable enough that I took a few pictures of them to add to the Nero library that I have. And I also remember interacting with them in game because it was just like, that's one of the cool things about role-playing is it's kind of ageless. It's something that we're still going to be doing when we're in the senior home, and it's something that most of us started before we were even teenagers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you get all these people nowadays saying, you know, all the old school gamers are these gatekeepers. We never were. We never were. You know, we always enjoyed having, I mean, you're a girl and you want to play? Oh, come on. You know, we always loved having the different people playing. Nero was one of the first times I really noticed that girls really liked to role play.
Yeah.
And the early on things was they loved the clothes. Vampire, Mind's Eye Theater, and Nero, I mean, I hate to say it this crudely, but I mean, a lot of the girls became the costume whores. You know, back before cosplay was really a buzzword, and you know, these girls would have 2, 3, 4 changes of clothes and costume over the weekend, and that was one of the big draws, I think, for them, where they could become this other thing and have all this costuming and clothing that went with it.
Yeah, and that just speaks to the different ways that different players will enjoy the exact same game. It's a game that captures your attention on so many different levels, just like The Simpsons. It'll make a kid laugh at one scene, and it'll make grandma laugh at another scene where the kids just don't get it. It just speaks to so many different people on so many different levels. And I maintain that players were not necessarily, or are not necessarily, gatekeepers. I always felt that was more of a system thing. People felt intimidated about joining, like we were talking about earlier, with rules like THAC0 and the crazy math and the difficulty of understanding the system. I think at its core, most people, if 5th edition had been around, the simplicity of 5th edition anyway, when we were first getting into gaming, there'd be so many more people playing the game. But because of how difficult it was just to get into it and find a group, I think that was kind of a gatekeeping that was created throughout. Nobody's fault, really.
I see what you're saying on that. It kind of, it wasn't necessarily gatekeeping. It was more, we're so, not reclusive, but introverted with our group that we're not out networking and finding new players.
Fortunately, we've been blessed, I guess, to have a pretty solid core group of players for a very long time, so we haven't had those difficulties of having to jump around to game stores, when I need to find a game, I need to find a group. That is an issue a lot of people do run into. But
Oh, yeah.
I do know that while the system itself can be a gatekeeper, there are definitely players out there who are like that. They They will only play with certain types of people. They won't. They're gatekeepers, like Jason said, and you can spot them. Sometimes you see them at a LARP or at a game store, and the way they talk to people, and you're like, okay, that's the kind of guy that either you need to have a conversation with them to try and get them to change their views, or you just stay away from them.
I gotcha. That makes sense. Now, our second primary topic dealt with horror games, which we've kind of delved into a bit here and there, talking about White Wolf and live-action vampire role-playing games. But any other specific topics that you guys want to discuss in that?
I think referring to horror, I don't think it necessarily is a system per se. Like White Wolf is definitely based on the old scary movies and stuff like that, the classic werewolf, Frankenstein, and vampires. But one of my current games that I have, I don't have players, but it's a game that's written in my own homebrew world, is a horror or suspense style game. So yeah, I'm playing Pathfinder, but I'm using things to create the suspense and the horror, not just narration, but music, which is difficult for us to hear sometimes as players on our digital format. But I also have things like timers. Timers you can hear, timers you can see. Even though it kind of breaks the anachronism, I'll use an hourglass, or I'll use the... I can't think of the word. The music timer. Come on, Dan, help me.
The metronome.
Thank you, the metronome.
Or better yet, the Jeopardy theme song.
Yes. But I'll use that because the sound of hearing that timing, even though it's not tracking anything, the tick and the click, it affects your psyche. And then I can change it, to heighten it or lower it based on, the pace that I set. The music that I use, Terry, I got the Hellraiser soundtrack, and Terry's like, "Can we listen to something that's not causing anxiety?"
Yeah, I
do those things to help create that suspense and horror.
Right. I use something similar, and Justin will remember this, but with a different intention, because we're playing Enemir and we're inside of this pyramid, and this will actually tie into last night's events where I talked about the sheriff incident, where we're playing with a very large group of players at this point. I think we had 10 people in the group, which for a digital play is very possible if everybody's very focused and not hogging too much of the time for themselves. Everybody's generally pretty open to create that space for another player to find their time within our gaming hours. But we had reached a point after a few weeks of playing with one particular player who we always kind of had in our minds, okay, when it's our turn, we have roughly about 3 minutes from conception to rolling the dice to resolving the effects of the turn. So we want to keep things moving pretty quickly, because if there's 10 players and everybody's taking the maximum of 3 minutes, we're looking at about a 30-minute turnaround before your turn comes back to the top of the initiative. But we've got one player who's consistently taking, like, no joke, 15-minute plus turns, because some of it mechanical misunderstandings, other parts of it that sometimes unintentional time travel that happens throughout the course of crafting what your turn is going to be, and then realizing, oh, I don't actually understand the narrative that's taking place around me, so if I try to commit myself to this action, things are not going to go well, so let me reverse all that and start over at stage 1. So I created this API for the Roll20 platform that was just a timer. And once this player's turn came up, here's your 3 minutes. It begins. It had the exact opposite effect of what I'd hoped for. Rather than enticing this player to take their turn faster, they were just so overcome with anxiety that they were like, I can't do anything now. I will have no turn at all because I know that I'm on a timer. And it was with that same group that later on we ran into the sheriff incident of James trying to self-sacrifice himself so the rest of the party could get away. And that was just a whole other bag of worms.
See, John had said something about that he didn't know I knew about it, and I still don't know anything about it. I guess I accidentally said something that made it sound like I know about it.
I don't know that that was his impression. I think he was basically saying that you did not know about it because you were not in the group at that time. But that was basically the scenario, is we're coming up at that transition point where it's the final game of Enemir for a couple months, because I do this seasonal transition where, okay, during spring and summer, I'll typically run like a mix of D&D and superheroes. During the fall, I like to go with like more of a horror theme for Agent Orange, and during the winter, I like to go sci-fi with Star Wars. So everything was kind of bracketed in like these 12 weeks for this game, these 8 weeks for this game, and we're on the final week of Enemir. And I don't want to leave it on just, okay, we're in the middle of initiative when we end Enemir, so we'll pick back up at this spot in the combat in 3 months when we come back. So it was very much it's getting late, we need to resolve this. The party's not going to complete the pyramid tonight because the intent is for them to just discover this plot point. That will be the cliffhanger. But we've discovered this plot point, and we're not really having the cliffhanger because you can never predict what 10 players are going to do with the time that they have at the table. So the solution was presented to James. I just whispered to him, okay, things are getting out of hand, the party's getting their ass kicked. How about your character does the sacrifice play and everybody else escapes? Not having enough foresight for my own part to realize that so many of these characters possess the boon cards that give you invincibility to all damage for 1d4 rounds. So here's James saying, okay, everybody get out of here, I'm going to sacrifice myself. And then 3 players throw down the boon card, and all of a sudden it's like, well, this is kind of like Jimmy Olsen trying to sacrifice himself for 3 Supermans. And somehow all 3 Supermen are convinced that this is a good idea, was essentially the mechanical conundrum that we found ourselves in. So it was with that thought process in mind coming into last night. I'm like, oh great, we're doing this again with James, where he's not really doing a sacrifice play, but we are going to do a narrative exit for his character that nobody's really supposed to have a hand in, because we're just trying to move the story to the next point. So for my part, again, foolishly not having enough foresight to realize, oh crap, Jason wasn't there for the sheriff incident, I specifically referenced that event at the start of the narrative. I say, okay, so we're going to have a narrative finale to the game tonight, so as not to have another sheriff incident. Here we go.
Okay, so yeah, I misunderstood the way he wrote it. So yeah, I didn't understand the context and out of character, and after hearing it, I'm like, God, now I'm like a dick. I kind of just jacked everything up, and I was kind of so insistent on saving a PC while letting NPCs just die, without a second thought. I'm like, yeah, well, all right, I kind of jacked this up, so I'm kind of trying to think of ways to weasel my way out of this next week and get back on a regular RP with the game.
Oh yeah, that's all part of the unpredictability of creating any kind of immutable event, because you never know how people are going to respond to it, and even then you have to have some degree of flexibility, even if it's immutable. And that's how we ended last night. Like I told you guys, I was very straight up with, this is the plan, this is what I was going to do. Obviously James isn't here next week, he will be back the week after that, but this is not set in stone. If somehow you guys are able to get him out of the van, then we'll play that as it happens to come across. It's just extremely improbable that is going to happen.
See, now the scene that keeps running through my head is Glenn under the dumpster from Walking Dead. He's gone. He's gone.
That was exactly the intent. I wanted to make it seem like he couldn't possibly get out of it, and then maybe if he was coming back, he'd be coming back in rolling a new character. But instead, shock, hey, it's actually the same guy, and somehow he got out of that just like Glenn did under the dumpster.
Yeah, I'd say that if in this situation, either like I said, you can find him all injured and fucked up, and we get him out of there. Or we get to the van, the passenger side door is open, and he's nowhere to be seen. It's like, whoa, did he get dragged off? What happened? Shit,
Exactly.
we can't stick around. There's zombies coming. Go, go, go.
Exactly. There's still any number of options, even though none of them are the one that I had necessarily in mind. That doesn't mean that that's how it has to go.
Oh yeah, we'll figure it out. And as a player, I hate messing up story like that. I really do. But if I'm kind of not in the know, I can be pretty insistent sometimes, and it's like, all right, fine, we'll go with it.
Hey, it's all good.
There's players like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, for my part, if there's ever a storyline that I'm insistent upon, like this is what has to happen, I'm generally pretty clear about that, because you can just almost kind of see, like, I'm just...
Yeah, we're not going to have another sheriff incident, and that's how this is going to go. But I didn't know. But that brings us back to more pop culture references. How does it go in the gamers, where the DM is giving the narration, and the players are like, I shoot him with my arrow. Not yet. I'm still doing the narration. All right, now I shoot him with my arrow. Okay,
Stop
now I
killing him. Let him finish his speech.
Let him finish dialoguing, then you can kill him.
Oh yeah, and that's the same character who, once the bandits show up, he's like, wait a minute, an ambush? I have the detect ambush skill. I want my roll. He's like, no, I already rolled it for you. He's like, no, that's bullshit. I want to roll for my own character.
But it's the pop culture, the things that always happen. We know we're at a disadvantage where we had something to fix that disadvantage. Yet sometimes you got to drop those plot grenades, and that's why I feel like a dick for last night. It's like, that was a plot grenade, and I just fell on it.
Yeah, like I kind of figured that was what you were doing. I wasn't sure exactly where the line was, and then when Jason was like, "We gotta go," and I'm like, "Well, in game, I would go with him, so I'm gonna go with him."
Right.
Oh, I'm loving your character, by the way, Justin. Just I see that person here in this area all the time.
The hat, man.
Not even the hat. I mean, the way he speaks, the attitude, and it's here.
Now we'll get back to our individual comments on horror games, but before we get too far away from it, I just want to cover John and Don's contributions here to the question. For John, it's no secret he's never really cared for the horror genre, except for when he was really little. He used to sneak down and watch horror movies that his brothers would put on after he went to sleep. Specifically, he remembers watching Puppet Master, and side note, he would later take classes from the director of that film. Horror simply isn't his jam, so he tends to avoid it. He did enjoy Resident Evil and Silent Hill back in the day, but they were never really scary. It wasn't like he was nervous or needed to play with the lights on. The games were just fun because of the gameplay. The horror element was kind of whatever. Killing zombies, not really any different than killing orcs or terrorists or whatever in any other game. Mostly horror genres bore him because the characters are overly stupid, the scares are mostly manipulations, oh, it was just a cat. The evil is usually so fantastic you can't take it seriously, demonic possessions, killer dolls. He prefers horror with more of a psychological thriller, in which case it loses those supernatural elements that make most horror horror. So it's a tough genre for me. He's a good sport for playing along with Agent Orange, and I hope to heighten his appreciation for different ways that horror can be, because those are very true cliches that he speaks to, but there are occasional exceptions to that, which I'm hoping that collectively we can kind of grasp upon. Now for Don, very similar to Justin, his horror game experience was Vampire the Masquerade live action many years ago. He was immediately singled out and later attacked by high-level vampires. He then went to the storyteller and let him know what happened to his character. The storyteller turned around, healed his character, and then presented him as a protected character under the leader of the event, which gave him time to learn the system, and he had a much better time with it after that. I find you can run into that for sure, and I feel like those may fall into that gatekeeper category that you were talking about earlier. Like, if you go to a live action event and there's a clique of people that their first objective is, oh, it's a new player who's going to add depth and character to our game, let's kill him and run him out on a rail. I mean, that's not what you're looking for.
No, that was one of the first things that I learned in Nero years and years and years ago. I went to a one-day event in Atlanta, and everybody was very friendly. You know, it was designed to, this one day was a one-shot. It was a Robin Hood kind of module, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
And there was stuff that was going on, and everybody was super friendly. And then I go to my first weekend event, and it's like high-level PCs are just walking all over everything, and if I complain, they turn around and kill me. So it's like, that's no fun, you know, and there's nobody to complain to. But
Right.
I learned that if I wanted to play, because I enjoyed it, I had to be in my own group. So I got some of my other friends, and we kind of came in and we did our own thing. And it wasn't so easy for those high-level characters to walk all over me anymore. You know, Justin has seen my back in my day when I was still dexterous, dodging spells, and especially when they're right in front of me. I could fight 2 and 3 people at a time. And, you know, when there's a group of you that can do that, those high-level PCs don't have as much of an advantage anymore.
Yeah.
You know, they'll still win in the long run, but you're going to make them work for it and use their resources to do it.
Yeah, that has been an unfortunate aspect of many LARPs that are around. It's gotten better with the newer blood that's come in. They're a lot more welcoming, but there are still some LARPs here and there around places that have that cliquish gameplay, kind of, and where people will be like, oh, that new guy, he just got his starting equipment, let's go rob him, and that kind of stuff. And it's just like, do you want your game to get bigger and better? Because you're going to keep people from coming in. Because that guy who just had a terrible time because you, as your established PCs, dicked him over, he's going to tell his friends, hey, let's not play this game, it sucks.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Chappelle Show skit where Calvin gets a job at Whack Arnold's. Hey, Calvin got a job. Hey, look, he just got his first paycheck. I'm proud of him. Let's go rob that dude.
Yeah, and it's like something we tried to do when Larry, Mitch, and myself were running, is we tried to make sure plot got to not just the high-level characters, but to the low-level characters as well, because that was one of the things I got mad about, is plot never did anything. But when you have 600 players in a weekend, plot is spread pretty thin. And their big players are where plot usually goes, and they
Right.
always told you have to be proactive, you have to get into the plot. And I'm like, I can't get in because they're always in it, and I'm not strong enough to run, I'm not high enough level to run with them. So we always tried to make sure we had low level plot that made the lower level PCs important, and that was a big thing.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one solution of many that I feel a live-action role-playing plot team has at their disposal. I don't know what the perfect combination of solutions is. I feel like a much larger plot team would also be a secondary consideration, but that's not always possible, especially if you've got a large number of players. There's only so many hours in the day, there's only so many ways you can spread the limited plot team and NPCs that you have. And the fact that our plot team continually, during our bigger events, tried to find ways, okay, even if it's the same dungeon that we're going into. Okay, this is the high-level entrance, this is the low-level entrance. They'll all meet in the middle to accomplish the same objective, and then it's just a big free-for-all battle, and even though the lower characters may not be doing as much, they're fighting alongside the higher-level characters, and there's a sense of accomplishment for everybody.
Oh yeah, and I remember one night. This still stays in my mind. I was in Atlanta. We were playing at one of the summer camps, and I was in a cabin with some of my friends, and it was called Low Town because this was where all the low-level PCs kind of stayed. And there was another group of cabins they called High Town, and then there was some other cabins, and then there was Monster Town and all this other stuff. But I'm asleep, and I wake up to somebody calling 125 Vorpal poison, and I'm like, I'm going back to bed. I can't fight that. And I'm like, this is right outside my door, and it's like, nope, I'm staying behind the ward. Never mind.
Oh man, that's brutal. I think one of my favorite LARP moments over the weekend, and it was at that Kingman event too, and thank God we had Valenti there. I think he was playing, but also they're just kind of overseeing, okay, this is the first big weekend event that they're doing. But it was the first big weekend for my character where I finally was able to cast 9th level spells. And of course, Ward was the first one that I went to. And I think I even had I didn't do Ward, I did the Circle of Protection. And brilliantly, I thought, I put it inside of the cabin that we were staying in rather than outside, because a lot of people would put it outside and then force any monsters to have to dispel that circle before they could get in the door. For my part, I had it just inside of the cabin door, and then anytime somebody tried to open the door, they would just boom, boom, right up against the Circle of Protection. The problem that I had out of game was that nobody possibly could know that. So here comes Larry and James Hill and a group of other skeletons and zombie NPCs, and they just opened the door, and I think Larry spotted the circle that I had, but he didn't realize that just by opening the door, he had already moved the circle. So, I mean, Larry's this big. So he's able to squeeze his way through the open door and come over to me and just... Dead. Kills all of us in our sleep. And all I remember is waking up and James Hill just laughing above us like, you guys are all dead. And I was like, what? No, I'm not. I'm going back to bed. I woke up the next morning just indignant that my plan had been foiled. I cast a Circle of Protection right here. There's no way anybody could open the door. I went right up to Valenti. I was like, dude, this is what happened. This is what I did. He's like, yeah, we'll take those deaths off of your trackers. Thank you.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a packet outside the door that that Plot's supposed to read before you go in. And I think we were spread so thin during that weekend, we just were never able to get to all the packets. I think we only did 1 or 2 that weekend.
Interesting. Yeah, if I had, I hadn't even known about that, but that would have been a smart move to do, or at the very least, just put a note up on the door that says there's the Circle of Protection on the other side of this door, rather than just assume everybody's going to know the in-game mechanics of what I'm doing.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a little like manila folder taped to the outside wherever there's an entrance to the building.
Okay.
That if the building is closed, or there's a raid going on, you had to have Plot there to open the packet, say, okay, Plot reads it, say, okay, this is on the wall, there's a lock, there's, this, and this. Okay, now the players can react to it, and Plot will guide them through that. And that weekend, there was Mitch and Larry, and I was in the tavern.
Right.
And, Joe helped us a lot, but, we had a lot of people to run monsters and stuff, but, that we weren't able to get to everything. I think the people that came in from Texas and the people that came in from somewhere else were the only 2 packets we got to, because they knew to do the packets.
I feel like most of the weekend events or back-to-backs, I definitely played in character a little bit more, but I think almost, if I did 5 weekends total, 4 of them I treated like camping trips. I was not really there in character. I was kind of there just playing my guitar, earning some gold pieces in-game, smoking like 35 packs of cigarettes in like a 2-day span. I remember Larry always laughed about that. Like, we're up at the super pitch black weekend up in west, up in the mountains. It's all misty and foggy and there's no lights, and he says, even with no lights, I can spot Dan from a mile away because he's always got that fucking cherry ember of a cigarette. And then as soon as the cherry ember goes out, there's a flick of a lighter as he's lighting another one. It's like, yeah, that was definitely me. I mean, I was just there to hang out, enjoy the scenery, enjoy being out of the city for a change, and the gameplay kind of came secondary. So if there was ever any plot lacking for me, I probably never noticed it during the weekends because I was just always, man, this is fun.
It was definitely beautiful up there. I loved Saratoga. The camps that they used up there, we had a couple of different camps, but they were all beautiful. I really liked it up there. I wish I had been able to play with you guys a lot more, but that was during my military time.
Right. Looks like we got CJ joining in here on the chat as well, and he was talking about similar mentality in Days, how people just kind of hammer new people for no reason. It's just kind of a shit attitude to have, like you want the game server to entice more players to join rather than just, oh, this looks fun, it's an open world zombie apocalypse survival game, let's see what I can, oh, I'm dead. Well, that was fun, I guess I'm not really going to play this anymore, and you just end up inadvertently or intentionally killing the game for everybody, including yourself.
That's what happened with me with Halo. When players could kick other players because they weren't very good, and it's like, come on, I'm a newer player.
Yeah,
I'm never going to get good if you guys keep kicking me.
Right.
And that discouraged me from playing any more Halo after that. I literally just stopped playing Halo. That it made me mad.
Yeah, I ran into similar, not getting kicked, but just realizing that I was not as good of a player as I thought I was in Halo 3. Once I first got my first Xbox Live subscription and I started playing with other people online in the death matches, and I was just, man, not only do these people just incessantly talk trash the whole time, which is distracting in its own way, but I can't frickin' hit any of them to save my life. I don't know if they've got a hack or if they're just that good or if I'm just that bad. So that was almost immediately, wow, I can play with the entire world, man. I want to frickin', I'm going to expand my player base so huge. I'm going to have all these new friends on here to, yeah, I'm going to go back to single player games. And the only time I ever had Xbox Live after that was when I was doing like the IAW stuff with WWE 2K13, and we were playing our own little wrestling alliance between ourselves.
I was thinking about that the other day.
Yeah, I don't know if those servers are still up for 2K13, but I was thinking about that like a month ago, just thinking if against all odds those servers are still up, it would be fun to kind of rehash that just as an occasional kind of thing, like we're talking about maybe every so many weeks instead of doing an actual tabletop game for the Tuesday stream, we'll play a video game together, or we'll play Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, or Gloomhaven, or any number of other things. And IAW was one thing that struck me as a possibility, because we had such an expansive roster of characters.
Oh yeah, it's like I really enjoyed. I was never very good at it. I enjoyed the story side of it. What was it? Hooligan.
Yeah.
Betty, the over ostentatious, like maxed out all the girly parts. What was it? Blue Demon.
Yep.
Oh, what were some of the others that I made?
Oh,
I
yeah.
made so many.
Yeah, Raven was one. I remember Justin was the only character that I created that I allowed to have a 100 stat, and that was for speed. Because strength-wise and endurance-wise, physically looking at him, you're like, okay, well, here comes Justin against Bad Earth, this giant 7-foot demon with impenetrable skin. you think Justin's gonna get his ass kicked, but then you just watch him just run in circles around him, and stamina was like very high as well. So like Badrith would get 3 swings off, and then here comes Justin. He's like up onto the top rope and flying drop kick. Yeah, Justin was one of the few people in IAW as well, I think, to actually hold our heavyweight title. I think maybe like 4 people ever held it, because I think we ran like 8 months of pay-per-views and weekly events. And for the first few months of that, it was kind of a changing title, but then as soon as my character had the ranking to challenge for the title, that my character, of course, was one of the few that I would actually play. The rest of them would kind of be a sim thing. But as soon as my character got the title, it was just like there was no taking that thing away from me. I remember Graybeal and I played a 60-minute Iron Man match that went like 15 to 14 falls or something in my favor. Like, it was just the most epic 60-minute contest ever. And I think
I remember that one.
Yeah, I think like every 10 minutes he had to pause. He's like, I need a cigarette. I gotta go outside for a cigarette, man. This is too stressful. I'm like, all right, man, we'll go out for another smoke, but I'm still gonna kick your ass.
I think I won on the cage match because I climbed the cage faster.
Yeah. And ladder matches too. Like, your character's just...
Yeah, that's one of those things where I knew I wasn't very good at it, but I enjoyed doing it because I was, hanging out with friends.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was one of our role-playing experiences outside of a tabletop RPG. It was one of the few times that I think 4 of us actually had that game. I think James had it as well, but I don't know how much he ever got into it with us. But you, Jason, and then Mike had it as well, and then, of course, I had it. And Don did as well. So, yeah, I think we had a multiple number of us who owned that game and were creating content for it consistently. And I remember going through the painstaking process of recognizing that WWE 2K14 had the exact same character creation, to the point where, okay, if I select face number 1 and option number 6, it's the same in both years. Fantastic! So I went through all 50 characters in 13, copied over all of their attributes so that I could start creating them for 14, thinking now we're all going to play it on this, only to realize that there's a glitch in the universe mode that prevents matches from being saved. So after creating all 50 characters, I played the very first Raw and got like 2 matches in before I realized, oh, something is really wrong here. The characters look great, the songs are amazing, but I can't progress past the first match.
Yeah, that's one of the games I bought just to play with you guys. I would have never bought it on my own, but I bought it so I could hang out and play with you guys.
Sweet.
Oh yeah, still an amazing game to this day.
Now that's one of the games, it wasn't necessarily designed as an RPG, and we kind of turned it into one.
Right? And there's people who actually have built successful streaming, I don't want to say careers, but they've built their streams off of a similar concept. I don't know if we were like originating it at that time, or if we just had a similar idea to so many other people and people were doing it before us, or what the case was. But I've seen other people that stream like WWE 2K20, and they'll have like 700 live viewers going on at that moment, and they're, of course, only playing like bikini matches and shit like that. And I don't know that they necessarily have the storyline and the commentary that we tried to build into our enterprise. But it's definitely interesting to see, man, we were doing this 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and look at the possibility of what it could have become if certain people didn't take in-game trash talking between wrestlers, because that's, I mean, God forbid, wrestlers are always so polite to each other. They never say anything nasty or negative about anybody. But that's exactly how the whole thing crumbled, was my character had the audacity to say something about somebody else's character in the context of the storyline, and this person out of game just took it completely to heart and was like, just so enraged. He's like, "You take my character out of that game. I don't want to be any part of it. You don't have the right to use my likeness anymore." Or anything. Jeez, dude. And I think what I said was that his character was that he was a poor sport. Like, literally the lightest possible insult that you could possibly level onto somebody. Like, man, you're just a poor sport, aren't you? What?
I want to ask who it was, but yeah, if I'm going to stay out of that one.
I'm pretty sure everybody who was ever part of that knows exactly who it was. Not the point of the conversation at all, just the unfortunate and abrupt ending to what was otherwise a fun experience up until that point.
You know, we've got enough history together as gamers together and individually, and I was thinking about this a couple weeks back, that's pretty much the glue that binds us together, but we always did other things that wasn't just gaming. You know, we'd go to movies or we'd go do this. You know, it was mostly geek culture.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, if I was still in town, I'd say, all right, let's go to the Millennium Fandom. I've never been there.
Right. Yeah, there was a period of time where after you had gotten back from the military and were living in Vegas, you and I were hanging out pretty regularly, even if it was just you would come pick me up and we would hang out at your apartment for a couple hours. And it was through those experiences that I saw the gamers for the first time.
Outrageous!
The Shadow?
The Shadow?
But I mean, you know, it's hard to find. I don't have gamers here where I'm at. The gaming group that I was gaming with, they all had kids and kind of did their own thing, and they hang out together. Now, I was the old man. You know, I'm a good 12 to 15 years older than them, all of them, and there was a bit of a generation gap, so I think that added to it. But you know, for several years we gamed pretty regularly, and then all of a sudden it just stopped. I don't even hear from them anymore.
Yeah, and I feel like it's so easy for that to happen to any gaming group, and it could have easily happened to our group so many times over the years. It's in that respect that I'm glad we've had those large 10-person parties at times, because, yeah, we'll have a 10-player party, but then a couple months down the line, we might be down to like a 3 or a 4-player party, and if we didn't have that 10 to begin with, we could easily be down to a 0-person party because we literally have nobody else to fill a group with.
Yeah, and it's not like we're letting NPCs die behind the door either. You know, we're trying to save them the whole time. But
please don't let me die. Oh, I'm dead.
You know, life just happens. It's like, is life the zombie that keeps taking us all out?
Yeah, I mean, I remember for my Wednesday night games when I was doing Thursday night, I started with 2 players. And I had to make them gestalt. I had to bring in an NPC just to make it so that they could do the adventures. People, you can't do it. That's not a full party. But eventually that grew to where I'm now. I got a 5-person group plus me.
Oh, nice.
And it's amazing how much. I mean, it creates friendships. I mean, look at the friendships we're developing digitally online. You know, we've got CJ in here. You know, look at some of the. Tonight's one of those nights where it's not as many, but it's becoming a personal thing. Somebody's watching our personal stories. You know, and they're becoming part of our personal stories. You know, and we become part of theirs by going to theirs. And yeah, some of us will never meet face to face. Some of us probably haven't seen each other face to face in, you know, several years. I know I've been gone a while.
Right.
Been getting homesick, ready for a trip to Vegas.
Heck yeah.
But we've become more than just the gaming. those very first experiences that we were talking about here caused these friendships.
Oh, very true. I still remember the first time talking to Justin on the phone after playing a Star Wars live action game with him and just kind of pitching to some of the people that I had made some personal connections with that night, just saying, hey, if you're enjoying playing this, I'm starting one of my own. It's going to be run out of my apartment. Obviously, I don't have a ranch with the kind of space that this does, but I have good ideas for stories, and we're going to have fun playing together. And people gave me their phone numbers, their contact information, and I just remember calling Justin and like, okay, well, what kind of character do you have in mind? And he said, well, I want to play a droid, but almost like a Terminator, to where he's kind of like disguised as a human. And that was the first character that he created for any of my games, who became known as the Bald Wookiee, which here we are 20 years later, and that's still a joke that's in regular rotation.
I never knew that joke. I never knew that story. See, so here we are, 20 years later, and I'm still learning new stories.
Yeah, and perhaps more funny is the player who coined that doesn't even remember doing it. Because I'm in contact with him again, and I was like, you remember the guy that you called the Bald Wookiee? Like, he's still part of our group, because he was asking, like, how's the gaming going? And I said, oh yeah, we're still playing with a lot of the same people. Justin, he's like, I don't know Justin. I'm like, of course you know Justin. He's the one that in the very first game we all played together, you said, what are you, a Bald Wookiee? Because Justin looks like a human, and his first attack roll, he says, okay, well, I've got a base 6 for my strength, and the only race in the game that can have a 6 for their strength is a Wookiee. And of course, Justin's not playing a Wookiee, so he's just like, what are you, a Bald Wookiee? And history is born.
I never knew where that came from, and that was before my time. Now, I came into this, Dan, you invited me to one of your regular RPG, beginning of Enemir. That's how I got into all of this, through Nero. You said, hey, you want to come game with us? And I'm like, yeah, sure, let's go.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I saw great things in you and Larry at the time, just from what I saw from you guys in Nero. I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely want these guys at the tabletop. And I feel like of the Nero crew, we probably gamed with at least like half a dozen or more of them over the years. A lot of the Hellish Rain group, some of them came into our group at different times, some of them together. I think on one occasion, Justin and Mike and I even we went over to their house to play with their group. So there was a lot of collaboration going on between all of us Nero players at different points in time.
Oh yeah, I jumped into one of their games, and it's funny. I created like almost the exact same character one of the other players in their game created. I made a character named Crystal Glass, and it was just by happenstance that we had the same name, the same concept. I mean, we didn't know each other, and it's like, and he's like, Mike, what did you do? I think his name was Mike, the one that had the glasses. He was their DM.
Yeah. They had two Mikes in the group, but I think Dagger was also Mike.
Yes, Dagger. He's kind of the concept of who I have for my Agent Orange character right now. Always having to push up the glasses.
Oh, you should not have said that. You know, Dagger's the Superman who got Callus ousted from Nero, right?
I didn't know what happened, because I was gone when this happened.
I only have my perspective of it, but my understanding was that he basically purchased a plot device through the plot team that if you recall, when my character was the noble, there were all these slanderous letters being posted around town of how bad of a noble I was and how against the people I was. And this in turn incited the people to riot against my character, which was part of what led to Callus's final mental breakdown, which led to his final death in character. So it was all kind of a chain of causality. It wasn't that Dagger physically killed my character, he just kind of orchestrated the events that made it happen. And then perhaps more frustratingly for my part, I recognize, okay, I didn't realize a player was doing this against me. I thought that the plot team was creating a challenge for me to try and overcome. So I tried to kind of meet fire with fire, and I also purchased a plot device of my own to try to figure out what was going on here, and one person's plot device unraveled my entire character, whereas my plot device was met with, yeah, you're unable to find out exactly what's going on here. Oh, man.
Yeah, that was all while I was gone. I didn't know any of that. Yeah, I had a different calling, just life had to be rebuilt.
Oh, for sure. And I think at that point the game had gotten very large as well, and even with, I mean, you're in the military, so they're already one plot person short, and this is a team that's always kind of been stretched thin, just trying to accommodate plot for the entire collective group of players that there is.
Yeah, that was the drawback, is it was always volunteer. And I mean, Justin, you jumped right into plot pretty much early, and you've been there ever since, haven't you?
Yeah, pretty much. They asked me to help because I guess they saw that I was good at the storytelling stuff, and I've been helping ever since. Even when Kit took over, he's like, "I'd like you to help be my main story stellar person." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, I can make stories for you," because he was more about the rules and stuff, and he was like, I need you to be my head storyteller to make the stories for the game. I'm like, sure, as long as you need me, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's a game I wish I could return back to, but my PTSD makes it a little bit different. It's not the same anymore.
It's a similar case for me, I guess more of a focus on you can't go back home. It's just never going to be the same as it was back then, partly because it's not the same as it was, but partly because I'm not the same as I was.
Right. And it comes right back around to that. We've evolved from those first excited, learning the dice to knowing the game, developing characters, that have these extensive backstories, and we're still first level. That's a lesson it took a lot of years to learn not to do, and it's still hard. You want to have story. You don't want to be a cliche where everything is my parents died and I'm seeking revenge and I'm a noun verber and blah blah blah. I've tried to do different things other than that.
Yeah, I like the at one point in third ed, I used the level drain mechanic to do a backstory where I was a great hero. I did all this stuff. But then I got level drained, so now I'm level 1 again. They're like, how are you level 1? I'm like, vampires.
I fell into a pit of whites.
I survived, but barely.
Yeah, exactly. I had 1 hit point and 1 level left to my name, but I used to be king. You might recognize me if it wasn't for the shriveled husk that I now wear as a body.
Yeah, but that's one thing I'm kind of disappointed that isn't in 5th edition. They don't have level drain anymore.
For sure. We definitely have to give 3E another shot at one of these days, and possibly even sourcebooks permitting and willingness to acclimate to yet another system willing, possibly even Pathfinder as well, because I think Jason's the only one of us who's actually played it, but I know it's very similar to the D20 system.
Pathfinder is just 3.5. It's got a couple of mechanics and that are different, but I pretty much ignore them. It's 3. It's what 4.0 should have been.
Yeah, 4.0 was almost a game master's dream and a player's nightmare.
Yeah, and that was my first. I'm not buying another one. And it was financial based, and then it turned out to be the system really wasn't that great, and a lot of people disliked it. And I'm like, I'm glad I didn't jump on that bandwagon. And even with what are we on 5e? I only have basic books, and I don't study them. I look up what I need as I need it. I'm guilty of that, and I won't be buying any other books for that. I have Player's Handbook, DMG, and I think a Monster Manual, and that's it. I only use it for references. I don't expand on it.
I like that aspect of 5e is that even after, 2014 that system came out. So we're 7 years into it at this point. And they don't have a massive collection of books. They've kind of gone different marketing strategies as far as like the miniatures and trying to bring in like these streamlined campaigns that you can kind of get in like a box almost. And even to this day, I have, of course, the same core 3 books that you do, but then I have Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and then maybe a couple other digital books that I've either purchased or you guys have gifted to me through Roll20, none of which are really essential to character creation so much as, ooh, this other company is creating a monster manual of their own design, so I can bring in new monsters that the players aren't necessarily familiar with. But as far as the rules option books, there's only the core 5, as best I can tell, and it makes it such an easy system for people to get acclimated to enjoy playing, and to just kind of hit the ground running.
Yeah, and all through the 2000s, they kind of built this business model that they had to rely on releasing new books and to justify having the big staff.
Right.
And to make more books, you need a bigger staff, and to make a bigger staff, you need to release more books, and it just became to where it started to eat itself. And
oh yeah, pyramid scheme.
Yeah, just about. But I think I bought what I wanted. And I still have a few Pathfinder books I want. I think Cult Adventures. I don't think I have that one up there. But there's still a couple more Pathfinder 1E books I want that I don't have. And I still have all my 3.5 stuff, which you don't need to convert. It's all the same.
Right.
So I bought a lot of Eberron stuff. I kind of became a fan of Eberron. I like Eberron. The Warforged became one of my new favorites. I enjoy the Changelings as well. But
I think Cheddar enjoys the Changelings too.
Oh yeah, he just likes hanging out with me. As soon as I get up when we're done here, I'm going to go get dinner. He's going to take my seat, and I'm going to only be on half of it. But I look back, and this particular show we're doing tonight really makes me look back and see all the different steps that I took over the years, to become what I am today as a gamer. And even though I'm not a professional gamer by any means, or I enjoy what I do as a hobby.
Right. I'm happy that I'm so meticulous with my note-taking, even as far back as high school. Like, I still have the pictures from the very first campaign that Mike and I played together in our freshman year of high school. And some of the plot details for that as well. I still have somewhere in my files that original dungeon that I ran on my very first game, where I walked in and got submerged and had to ditch all my equipment in the illusionary dungeon. My sister's first husband gave me that module like a year or so after I was into gaming, and I was having trouble designing dungeons that were as sinister as his, so I just said, can I see the floor plan for that? And he ended up giving it to me. And I think I've ran that maybe 5 or 6 times in the years since, to where I've kind of played it out. Definitely fun to see that evolution along the way, though, and having all those notes can make it much easier to do, especially for Ultimate Star Wars, which I have the most notes for of any, even more than Enemir, because Enemir I've never written elaborate cutscenes for like I did for Ultimate Star Wars. So it's very cool to just go back and read Episode 1 with Jet Ray and Episode 2 and get into the Clone Wars and see the evolution of that. And then even when we get to the classic trilogy, the new group of characters, and just how powerful that group ended up becoming and taking out the Council of Sith Lords, up to our own sequel trilogy, which Justin was very complimentary on numerous occasions, just in how I was able to incorporate the existing post-Return of the Jedi expanded universe and merge that with the new canon sequel trilogy. So kind of like there's still the Imperial Remnant, there is also the First Order. There is the New Republic, there's also the Resistance, and there's all these different factions that are playing in hand with each other.
Yeah.
The amount of work that you had to have, math and just figuring out, okay, so this is what's happening in the Legacy, this is what's happening in canon, I got to kind of work these together into what I was doing with my game. I'm like, that's a lot of damn work.
It's a labor of love for sure. I have an undying love for chronology, and especially Star Wars chronology, because that's where I got my love for chronology, was from just this library of books that I keep looking up at right here. Just how in-depth they've gone, and how different writers over decades were playing off of the work of those that came before them and bringing back characters that you thought were never going to be part of the saga ever again.
Oh, definitely. And, when it comes down to it, you're very inspiring with the Star Wars stuff. I mean, all I wanted to do was make a character, and it turned into like page after page after page. I have to create this backstory in order to do that backstory. Then I have to build this in order to make that make sense. And then, it's like, I need to make more. And you're like, all right, I'm not going to read it anymore until you're done. And it's like, all right, I'm done. Wait, one more. All right. Okay, one more. And it's like, all right, it's like an artist. You have to know when to stop and walk away. And it's like Dan finally got fed up, and it's like, all right, I'll stop.
Well, not only that, that kind of lends itself to what I was saying about, to your point of edition fatigue. How I'm kind of reaching that point, but more so on my brain is getting too occupied that I don't want to force out the old knowledge with new knowledge. And when I'm getting your backstory, it's like, okay, this is great, but then you replace it 2 days later, and I'm like, oh man, now I have to forget this to replace it with it. Just give me the final product when it's done, and I'll be happy to integrate that into this freaking filing cabinet up here.
Oh yeah, in researching all that, I enjoyed doing that because it means something in those games. Like the early days of Enemir, when everybody was writing stuff. Damn, Justin, you had to create 3 different pantheons for Enemir in the beginning.
Oh yeah, he created a lot of them.
Page after page after page for all of that stuff. I'm like, how are you? You must have just hit a creative streak, and just boom, knocked them all out.
And I still have those original prints that he gave me of the first Pantheon, including the beta prints, because I think you ran out of ink the first time that you printed out the deities. So for one of them, it just says, this is the Lord of the Undead. He has a very devious appearance. He likes to rub his hands together a lot. And that's it. And you're like, that's not all there is to the deity. There's a lot more, but I ran out of print. And I still have that copy where it just says, Nar-Visal, or whichever deity it is, he's the Lord of the Undead. He smiles evilly and rubs his hands together a lot. Wow.
I still have copies of the handwritten versions of those with your hand-drawn emblems and logos and stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nar-Visal was not the god of the undead. He was the god of greed and knowledge. He was the evil god of knowledge, though. That's why it was covetous. That's why he always rubbed his hands together.
Oh, okay, so I got the right deity, just the wrong profile. Because you think, I mean, that just shows how big Enemir is, that even I, like, I forget parts of it all the time, because not only is it such a big property, but chronology-wise, it has run such a long time that even the deities are not necessarily consistent from one age to the next. Now, to answer CJ's question here in the chat, he's asking about how do you get characters level and upgrade. That is basic experience points, which most role-playing games have kind of converted, whether it's a video game or a tabletop game. For Dungeons and Dragons, we actually have like in-hand hardbound books, or some of us just have PDFs on our computer. But it shows the chart, the progression of, okay, your character is level 1, it takes this many experience points to reach level 2, and then once you do, there's another chapter that says, okay, well, if you're playing this kind of character, here's the procedure for advancing to level 2. If you're playing this character, here's the procedure for doing that same advancement. And because they have so many different race options and class options and gear options and then special quality options that you can take to kind of customize your character, the possibilities are pretty much endless. Like, you can play 7 years in the same system like we've been doing with 5e and still find new character options to portray in any campaign you play.
Oh yeah, we still go back to 3E and find new options, you know?
Yeah.
I never played this. Oh wow, why did I
Right.
never play this?
Oh, yeah.
You know, one of our gaming groups here, we had somebody playing a druid, and everybody's like, druids are boring. And she came out with this, like, really cool option. She was like one of our most powerful casters. And it's like, whoa, you know, this druid just out magicked the wizards, you know, with lightning and all this other stuff. And it's like, it's really cool to see that happening.
Oh, absolutely. It is kind of like that, CJ, as far as integrating a new player. There is somewhat of an honor system, but it depends if they're a new player to the system or if they're a new player to their group. New player to the system, they're kind of in a state where the other players and the game master themselves, they should be focused on just trying to make the player feel welcome, to make sure they're enjoying their experience, not necessarily hammer them down so much with, well, you can do this if you have this ability, you can do this with this mechanic, make sure to check page 176. If you're playing with somebody who's experienced to the system and they're joining your group with a character that they've either created under the Game Master's vision, or they're creating a character that they've made on their own and they're just presenting you with, here's the sheet, how do you like it? Can I bring this character in? It's kind of a mixed bag. It depends on the person, it depends on the game, it depends on the other players. But because we're all working within the same common mechanics, there's a balance that is kind of created just as a result of that.
And, you know, something I learned a few years ago, CJ, is the very first rule that is not optional is have fun. If it's not fun, why play?
Right.
And when other rules and stuff get in the way, they kind of need to be optional, where you have to be able to creatively fudge them or work around them to make the game continue to be fun. You still want that threat of potential death. I mean, or being scared. That's why we enjoy roller coasters. We get scared in a controlled environment. You know, that's why we watch scary movies. We're scared in a controlled environment. Nothing's really going to happen to us, but having that sense of the adventure or danger really adds to all of that. And as you gain in those levels, you know, that's what makes it worth it.
Also, with new players to their new system, a lot of times what I've seen it done is it'll be like, okay, so what would you like your character to do in this situation? And they'll be like, well, I want to attack him with my sword. Okay, to do that, you'll have to do this, this, and this. Let's see what you have on your character sheet. It will allow you to do that. And so it just kind of, instead of saying, hey, what's on your sheet, saying, what do you want to do? Let's help you do that with what your character has on its sheet.
Right, and then you kind of learn throughout the process of playing the game and realizing that, oh, so the only options, or the only limitations are my own imagination. And some hard and fast rules like, okay, well, if you're playing a human fighter and your answer to the question of what do you want to do right now is, well, I like that fireball that guy cast last turn. Can I do that? Well, if you pick up this class, you can. And if you're dealing with an entirely new player, you can even kind of add something like that on the fly and just say, yes, absolutely, you're playing a fighter wizard. You didn't realize it until just this moment. But as you get to know the system more and more, you start learning that these classes can do this, these races can do this. There's still the option to do anything with any character, those hard and fast limitations notwithstanding. Because obviously, the bard character is going to be possibly not as good at healing as the cleric character. The bard does have some healing options, but the character, that's kind of their bread and butter. Meanwhile, the cleric is probably not going to be as good at inspiring the rest of the group through music or prose as the bard is, because that's their bread and butter.
Yeah, there's pretty much 3 basic classes, and I hate to say it that way. You've got your damage dealing fighter, you've got your healer, and you've got your range damage dealer with a wizard. And I guess you could add a rogue in there for a 4th, being your skill monkey, for lack of a better term. But, that's everything else is a variation of that.
Right. Oh, yeah. And we appreciate your questions there, CJ, and hopefully that gives you some more information on role-playing games, tabletop role-playing games. And yeah, as I mentioned to you last week or so, the option is open if you ever want to kind of dip your toes in that, if you want to join the larger group, or if you want me to kind of craft something for just you individually. I'm looking into those possibilities, other players' availability permitting. Now, our show has gone a decent time tonight. We had a decent amount to talk about, and I appreciate all of your feedback. I want to thank Evil Dawn and Mr. Murtaugh for also contributing some answers on our Discord chat right there. And extra special thanks to CJ for jumping in and interacting with us here in the chat. And of course, always thanks to Jason and J-Man there, the co-hosts for Roleplaying Unlimited Out of Character. I, of course, am Tragically HP, wishing you happy gaming. And are you with us? Hope you all have a great evening. We will catch you this coming week with Movie Monday, Tuesday Gaming, and another episode of Out of Character. We're actually going to have another special guest host next week. So, yeah, we will see you all then. Have a great evening, all.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.